Good.
My name's on here, but I don't have the agenda. That could work.
Go to agendas on the bottom left-hand corner.
It's grayed out.
Would you like to talk to?
It's one item.
We still Friday. What day is it?
But I still have to do it.
I understand. Were you working?
I was.
I thought since it's grayed out.
Nope. I gotta do this stuff. Don't think, Cody. Just do.
Well, one of them was blue.
Thank
It's
you.
like obviously inviting me to touch it. And the others are like all grayed out.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that defense in the court of law. Inviting me to touch it just sounds pretty bad.
Well, in today's day and age, I'm
Thank you, ma'am.
I do 100% of my work. So
Yeah.
about 90%. Okay, Cody, you'll do that.
Oh, yeah. I'll do all of that for you.
Did she? Yeah. Okay.
All right, we're past 10 o'clock. All right, you can call this meeting to order. Notice the meeting. Sorry about that, take two. Call the meeting to order. Notice this meeting was properly posted on Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. We're going to do a roll call for attendance here. Cody Compton is present in the BOCC room. Christy Miller.
Present BOCC room.
Amy Lawrence.
I'm here.
Let the record reflect Ms. Lauren is with us via video. Mr. Honeycutt.
President of the BOCC room.
Mr. Lambert. Present in person. Mr. Davidson.
Present in person.
Mr. Morrison.
Present, video conference.
Thank you. Ms. Mertens.
Present in person.
All right. We're all here. We got a notice on here. If one or more members, I'm sorry, do we have the, there it is. Sorry. Item number 1, discussion of possible action to set date, time, and place. Meeting will reconvene in the event technical difficulties arise during the course of this meeting and cannot be corrected within a maximum of 30 minutes. Do we have a motion?
Motion for 2 p.m. today in the same room.
We got a motion for 2 p.m. Reconvene if we have technical difficulties that cannot be fixed within 30 minutes. That would be in this BOCC meeting room. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second by Mr. Honeycutt. The motion was by Mr. Davidson. We'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert? Aye. Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence?
Mr.
I'm sorry, Ms. Lawrence. Sorry.
Aye.
Hey, this is new to me, reading the roll. I got on a Mr. roll there. Ms. Lawrence, my apologies.
It's okay. Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. All right, item number 2, discussion and possible action to address the Corona Relief Stimulus Funds received in the amount of $47,291,598 and the guidelines on the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, otherwise known as the CARES Act. This discussion may include, but not be limited to, expenditures that we've already incurred and what expenditures can be made that fall within the CARES Act guidelines.
Chairman, may I start?
Certainly.
I would like to enter into the record a document that was received when the money came in. It has some guidelines. They can be kind of vague, but I think it's a starting point. I'd like to pass those out and admit it to the record. And then what I'll do for Amy and Mike, email them as soon as I get back to my office.
Christy, is that's the original one?
So these were the ones that were linked. There's
been 2 updates.
Yeah.
Yesterday was the latest update, and I just got off the phone with the White House just a second ago, and there's going to be yet another update from tomorrow.
For those on the committee from the discussion, should we start with this, and then if you'll get us the updated ones, or would you rather not?
That's what I was,
This be part of the record. I think this is good information.
Well, I think since this was received by the county with the funds, I think it would be appropriate for us to receive this document.
Okay.
Is that your motion, Ms. Miller?
Yes.
second,
Okay, we got a motion by Ms. Miller to receive this document. Mr. Davidson has seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison? Mr. Davidson?
aye.
Mr. Lambert? Aye. Mr. Honeycutt? Aye. Ms. Lawrence?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. You're welcome.
May I go ahead and start?
You certainly can.
Before we start talking about the expenditures, what it can be spent for, how we're going to account for that, what I would like to do, I know Danny and I are kind of waiting till we got together with BET to decide what type of funds and the cost center or munis org we'd like to put the money in. Clearly, it's in our bank, it's collateralized. We have moved it to a higher earning investment, but as of right now, it's not booked into a fund. I did check with Tulsa County. They have put theirs in a fund they already had. It's called Special Projects. From there, they created a munis org named COVID-19, you know, whatever we want to title it. Clearly, we do have to have these funds separated. We did check with the state auditor. They said it did not have to be a specific fund, but it does need to be separated at least by account, munis code, or org, or department. So I think before we get into the discussions of spending the money, maybe see if we can come up with a recommendation. Clearly, I think only funds, don't we have that go across EOCC? And we'll have to get the fund set up and get booked. I'd probably suggest kind of a special revenue fund that would be budgeted per se, meaning you would encumber money, have a requisitioning officer, and so forth. We could name it a special project, and its first department is something related to COVID. Clearly, these dollars will need to be paid back at some point, and we can only spend them through December 30th. And if there's no money in the fund, it wouldn't show up on the ledger, but we would have that. Say there's another round or more money, or, you know, do you have to separate it by the first stimulus part and the second? And that would allow for, you know, things in the future. So that would probably be a recommendation to get that set up.
To your point, would it not also make it a little bit easier to maintain this account, being that we're going to be crossing over into 2 fiscal years? We got a current fiscal year and then got a new one getting ready to start up. If this were a special revenue fund instead of a fund just within the general fund, because there's less limitations on your rollover dollars.
Yeah, very much so. In the general fund, cost center in general fund, it's just going to inflate what general fund looks like for
Correct.
1 or 2 years and kind of blow comparisons out of the water and that kind of thing. So, yeah, good point about this.
Yeah, from an accounting standpoint, my discussion with Christie and the feedback we got from the auditors, I think a special revenue fund, just because of the magnitude of this stimulus and the amount that we're going to have to track. Much as I hate setting up new funds, but I think a special projects fund would make sense, and then we put up a cost center under there for the COVID-19 stimulus, and that way we can use that special projects fund for anything that happens pop up like this in the future. Hopefully this is a one-time event. You never know. And to Cody's point, yeah, then those funds can carry over into the next year. For tracking purposes, this would be the best case scenario.
So this, I'm assuming, and I don't want to put more work on anybody else, but would this be a special revenue fund that would be set up in the treasurer's office for you guys to manage and maintain, or are we needing to have discussion and a recommendation? Who would be the the caretaker of that special revenue fund? Because it's got to be somewhere, right? I would think.
Clearly, we would manage, the dollars have been invested and collateralized. I would foresee that ultimately BOCC would be approving any type of claim against the fund. Therefore, I would suggest that, like Kelly Thomas, be the requisitioning officer. You do need one point of contact where all this documentation on these expenses are going to end up. I know Tulsa County is coming up with their own kind of application form that, say, a department or an office would attach some documentation, fill out, and it's a request to be reimbursed by the fund. If we could always, I think when we get the fund booked, you could spend directly from the fund.
Right.
I think that is more appropriate at that time, but ultimately there still needs to be documentation done. Kelly would requisition, encumber. It would hit a BOCC claim that happens, weekly and go from there.
And Miles, what are your thoughts about, on our FEMA declarations for disaster and whatnot? Mr. Barnes tracks all of that currently. He's kind of leading the charge on the emergency committee. I'm wondering if maybe his office, since he is a BOCC department, would not be the good landing spot.
I would say that my discussions with Mr. Barnes and the beginning of this, he was very thankful that somebody else was taking the lead on this and doing this besides himself, because he was swamped with all the FEMA stuff that he's already doing, the pods and everything else that he's doing. I think Christie's probably on point. We've got Kelly there, and we could use her and probably should use her. Is it similar to FEMA? Yes, but allowing Kelly to run with this, I think, would be just fine. And I don't think we need to further burden, especially during weather and everything else that's going on, Barnes with an additional tracking.
Christie? Hello?
Somebody saying,
Christie?
Started to.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? I understand that the money's been deposited, and you said it was put into an account for a higher rate of return.
Yes.
Okay. Those monies that come back on the return, where will those monies go?
That has not been addressed yet. We will track any interest earnings separately. When this documentation originally came out, there was not much on, interest earnings was not addressed. All that was really said, it was very vague on when the money, it was basically, do we have to turn the money back in? The answer was yes. There was not a date. There was not anything. What we'll do is we will track interest earnings separately. I would suspect there's going to be more coming out on what kind of documentation might have to be turned in, even a date when the funds will have to be turned in, and it may or may not address the interest. But we'll have it invested separately. We'll track the interest it earns, and we'll see what's decided on the federal level.
Thank you.
If there's no more discussion, I'll make a motion to work with Danny and the county clerk's office to establish a fund and cost center, a special revenue fund to be encumbered with Kelly Thomas as the requisitioner, and we will get an agenda item ready for BOCC.
second.
Typically, when a new fund's created, that goes to the budget board, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion?
Well, I wonder if I need to amend I said BOCC. If it needs to go to budget board, we can certainly do so. Just trying to think if we want to try to see if they'll meet early, but
See if BOCC will meet there.
budget board.
Budget board.
Um,
What do we do?
I mean,
3 weeks out.
Yeah.
for them to meet. And this is Tuesday. So
I mean,
probably-
clearly we have access to these funds. Once it's set up, well, we probably need their approval to get it set up.
just to get the costs into the fund.
The funding cost.
So,
I would recommend that budget board meets earlier, but yet that's not I can't really call that. Well, I will,
yeah, let's,
Let me amend my motion that it'll go before budget board
Right.
and that we would prefer the budget board meet early to get this going.
I agree with those amendments, so my second still stands.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, do a roll call vote. Ms. Martins?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lawrence?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. Sorry, I was looking through here. I read early this morning, and I'm not able to locate it right now, but there was, I think it was in the FAQ section on Treasury about can you deposit the funds into an interest-bearing account and whatnot. The answer was yes, and I was wanting to relay the more specific information. It's in there somewhere. I'm not able to locate it at this moment.
Christie, do you have an idea how much interest we're talking about?
Hopefully decent, the rates aren't that great right now, but I don't know. I can try to see what we've earned so far. It's been the first few days. We've kept it on a daily rate.
Are you thinking that might offset the $800,000 that we were anticipating in less interest on next fiscal year?
Yeah. That would be nice.
Okay, so we've established that we're going to make a recommendation on a special revenue fund being set up and who the requisitioning officer for that fund is going to be. What other discussions does anybody have related to this topic?
Do we have an idea what Tulsa's agreement or amount was?
Tulsa got quite a bit more than us, 113.
I believe they got 113. The
City of Tulsa.
Tulsa County did not have a municipality within their limits that was able to claim any money on this round of funding because the City of Tulsa has a population of less than 500,000, whereas in Oklahoma County, Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County both qualified. So Oklahoma City received payment based upon their population, and then Oklahoma County received payment for the population of the county minus the population of Oklahoma City.
Mike, the actual amount that Tulsa received is $113,799.60. The 113.6.
Earlier, Cody, you had kind of mentioned FEMA and Barnes being very familiar with the tracking, et cetera. One of the things that in my discussions with the Treasury and everybody else is the tracking of our current expenditures and making sure that all of those are given to a central point and tracked in the same way that Barnes usually does. And I think Kelly's can do a great job at that. We need, the sheriff's department, Keith's additional 26 people in response. The plexiglass partitions, I mean, every little expenditure that is made needs to get to Kelly, and we need to track it because that is directly something that we should be using these funds for. Now, the question of what else we can use these funds for is pretty extensive. And when I send you these latest guidelines, and I got them literally right before I walked in here, so I'm reading through them as we've been talking. This one certainly Christie provides a whole lot more guidance compared to the original document on the 22nd that you and I looked at and said, what in the world is this? Seems like there's nothing that we can't use it for. So this does narrow it a little bit, but it is still very open and wide as to what we can use it for. It seems to, in the discussions I've had, it's more of a respond and react kind of thing. They're not going to approve projects. Hazard mitigation is one of the things that we have talked about, and that's planning for the future and making future changes around these buildings and spending money to make them better, whether or not that's going to be allowed. And as it sits currently, it does seem to be that the hazard mitigation will be something that we can spend the money on in the future. So whatever that be, whether it be the taking the temperature through some sort of things at the front, the body scanners or whatever, things will be, I believe, will be provided for in these funds. So one of the things that I was thinking when bringing us together was to not only find out what we need currently, that we need to draw down off of these, which I'm sure the sheriff has stuff that they need yesterday, but what is it that we think we're going to need to be able to safely reopen and do our normal business every day?
I have two quick questions.
Yeah.
And I do realize that you just got those and haven't read through, so you might not know. Does it seem like two things are still consistent? One, that the expenditures are March 1st through December 30th.
Yes.
So that hasn't been extended or changed. Two, that the overall initial guidelines is if it were not for COVID, you would not be buying it. Is that still the...
Except for that's the mitigation question that has yet to be really addressed. There's
So mitigation as in if there's another round?
well, yeah, because that's. I mean, we're responding to today's pandemic, and that was my question this morning.
Right.
We're responding with this money to today's pandemic, but what about tomorrow's? And that turned it into the hazard mitigation, and they're like, well, that's certainly something that you should be looking at. Well, okay.
Yeah, it's not like it's strict
Give us some
guidelines
guidance.
through December 30th, but then you spend money on, I don't want to say a stockpile, but a good
Right.
amount of masks beyond December 30th.
Yeah, and it's just, the way I understood it is the expenditure, I mean, the money is basically got to be expended, whether or not it's actually received or not is another question. So
Yeah.
I've also asked about clawbacks. What's the likelihood of the Treasury Department coming back and saying, okay, that one wasn't acceptable, give us $16 million back, whatever. And
Well, Miles, to your point about the purchase, whether it's received or whatnot, unless the guidance has changed, as the Treasury Department this morning, which has significantly more guidelines than it has in the past, the requirement that the costs be incurred during the period, there is a brief explanation, and it says a cost is incurred when the responsible unit of government has expended funds to cover the cost. So that would indicate an actual spend of the money and not just a order and PO, a requisition being issued.
yeah,
And I think and I think Christy and I might be on the same page. I don't know what you're referencing as far as mitigation, because when you mentioned mitigation a second ago, you talked about potential thermometers and body scans. I think that those are items that if it were legally permissible for us to do and it were a policy that was chosen to do, those would be fairly obviously within the bounds of a a direct expense. I think whenever you look through their guidelines, they talk about expenditures on direct items. Well, hang on here. Expenditures directly to the emergency, and then which would be the PPE that's purchased. It would also be the measures taken on a reopening, because that's all part of the issue. And then the other expenditures that they talk about are second order effects of the emergency, such as providing economic support to those suffering from employment of business interruptions, yada, yada, yada. So it seems to me, as of right now you may have more information than the rest of us have. I don't know how updated Treasury's website is, but currently, I think what you're referencing on the thermometers, I don't really see that as a future mitigation. I think that's something that's directly related to the current pandemic.
Reading through the previous guidelines, hopefully this will be made a little more clear with the updated guidelines. Are we talking just expenditures incurred by Oklahoma County, or is $47 million available to other entities within Oklahoma County?
The guidelines updated this morning, and Miles, once again, you may have, I'd say updated this morning. I pulled them up again this morning to see what the guidance is. In the past, there was a question about whether states could take money that they receive and pass them to local governments, and the answer was yes, but it was silent on other entities. In the FAQ section now, there is a question: may a unit of local government receiving a fund payment transfer funds to another unit of government? So that would be anybody other than the state, a local government, which would be us. So can we transfer to another local government? And the answer is yes. For example, a county may transfer funds to a city, town, or school district within the county, and a county or city may transfer funds to its state, provided that the transfer qualifies as a necessary expenditure incurred due to the public health emergency and meets the criteria, section 101D, yada, yada, yada. So I think one thing that we have to be careful of is when we're looking at a potential transfer to another entity, we're still going to be responsible for tracking and making sure that we spend the dollars in a manner that's in accordance with the requirements set forth in the Act. And that means that any money that we transfer also has to be spent along those same guidelines. So we'll need to receive documentation from those other entities that we transfer to make sure that the money is being spent appropriately when we have to submit our documentation on the back end.
I'm glad that question was asked and more updated in the back section. I took the first round to be, if you're a city, you would go to the state first, or go to the state. Now that we're a part of that,
Which is still the intent, from my understanding. It's still like Choctaw National Park.
like we got our part that we would have normally asked the state for based on our population.
Correct.
So when we get calls from cities, I know, which has happened even in our office to Butch, we've said, you need to go ask, get with the state for other counties and cities. So.
Well, the follow-up question to that in the FAQ section is a fund payment recipient required to transfer funds to a smaller constituent unit of government within its borders? The answer is no. For example, a county recipient is not required to transfer funds to a smaller city within the county's borders. So it is not a requirement.
If I'm a city, I'm really confused right now on where I go to ask for some help. State level or county level. Maybe we can get that clarified or something to think about.
Yeah. The other what I would like expounded on in this line of questioning that's in the FAQ section that's not abundantly clear is what about other units of government not mentioned here, cities, towns, and schools. My question is City County Health Department, which is a conglomeration of Oklahoma City and Oklahoma County efforts to provide services to the community. They have expended a fortune in relation to this event. And so my question and concern is, they're just bleeding through money. I mean, that's happening, and they, just like us, didn't forecast this. I mean, they got other programs and stuff that they're involved with that if they don't receive help, I'm sure that's going to be significantly impacted in the future. So I would be interested to know if beyond just other local communities that we can help, can we also extend a hand to entities like City County Health Department, who is on the front lines taking care of all of us.
The guidelines also address expenditures related to the provision of grants to small businesses to reverse the cost of business interruption.
I feel like we're all these questions, City County Health, the small businesses, and now the cities, the state got some money, the city got some money, and I know they're trying to already take applications for small businesses. And City County Health, where does the City County Health, small business, where do they start? Do they have to go to the state level first? If you're a business within the incorporated area of Oklahoma City, you go there first, and then
It's really kind of up to the holder of the funds on whether, because they establish those guidelines. So like the business thing.
But how does
we can use it for that.
Clearly we have to have documentation on what it can be used for. Are they going to turn that into the state, the city, and us? And
well, it'd be, if we're the only ones with the program, they would only turn it into us.
Well, I know the city's doing some.
Okay.
With their money for small business.
Right. Then they would turn one in there as well. And it would be whether or not we were working with the city to provide additional, or, okay, you got city money, but you're not going to get this money. My thought about that would be pretty simple. If Oklahoma City is doing that and supporting Oklahoma City businesses, let's look at all the other cities that are within our county, or those small businesses that their cities probably don't have the ability to do that type of grant funding program.
Well, and the other question, I hate to be the L word up here, the lawyer, but the other question is, even though the federal government gives pretty broad latitude on what we can do with these specific funds, what statutory restrictions are there for something like that? So we're going to need to look at that, but those are great ideas that the city's already looking at. I think there's conversations out there on rent assistance for folks that are going to be staring down evictions at a staggering rate when the courts open back up over there. People that are unemployed, can we utilize this money? Because we're not talking about ad valorem tax dollars here. We're talking about dollars that we're given specifically to local governments to provide relief to folks. So I think we'll need to ask some questions, but I think what was mentioned the other day in another meeting was a watch list of sort for this particular fund. I had some ideas that we're tracking, and I don't know if we're far enough along to be able to associate dollars with any of those ideas, but have some type of a tracking list of items that that we're concerned about and that we want to get on the list. For instance, I mentioned city county health and rental assistance, and, we hear, small business, help and, other local municipality, potential transfers. So I think it might be good for us, so we're not just, talking into the ether and not, able to hone in. We've been pretty successful at utilizing the BET watch list for our reserve account. Maybe if we start some type of a tracking list that we can put down and then do a little bit more research on whether we can or can't do a particular item.
I like that idea for ones that we have questions on. Clearly, if a department or an office bought that thing directly, the plexiglass, I hate to have it on a watch list, and I'd hate to slow it down.
Certainly, yeah. No, I'm talking about these other things. Now, on the watch list, we will need things like Keith's expected expenditures to finish out the year in PPE and that kind of stuff. The future expenditures would be a good idea to have on there, just so we know what's going on. But no, you're absolutely right. The day-to-day things that have already been done and that will continue to happen going forward, those need to continue to happen. But some of these other items, I think we need some type of tracking mechanism.
If you want to discuss then expenditures that are known related to COVID and qualify, the process of if I'm Keith, when I go back to my office and I want to start getting reimbursed, what's my first step? Is it just to go straight to Kelly? Do we want to have a form? Is it the process of Kelly just to BOCC for approval?
Well, I think we need a mechanism in place. Now, what that mechanism is going to look like, I don't know, but we need to make sure that somebody or somebodies that understand the ever-shifting framework that we're working with, but to the best of our ability, understand what we can and can't do. That way, it can be addressed by that person or persons when a request comes in for X, Y, or Z. They can say, well, hang on just a second. I don't know if that qualifies. Let's figure this out, as opposed to stuff just being, free for all. And then all of a sudden we get on the back end and realize there's a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't a necessary expenditure incurred due to the public health emergency, and then the county is staring down having to reimburse the federal government for funds that it spent in a lawful manner. Mr. Monroe?
Can this not be tracked like capital projects, but we assign numbers to different purchases? Kelly, Thomas tracks that. Move forward in that way. Yes. Gee, that's a whole lot of.
No, that's what I was envisioning. We have a fund and a cost center, but when you go to expend, you're going to expend, I don't know if we're down to face mask level, but you'll put sanitary, you'll put personnel, you'll put overtime.
We're tracking all of those things now, and I have estimates to get us through the end of the calendar year. So if we could come up with some simple mechanism that allows us to get purchase orders in place so that we can move forward, I think that would be helpful. Master of the obvious.
Yeah, well, let's put some thought into how we are going to track it in the munis system by department, by project or something to that effect. I like what you're saying right now, track by project numbers.
That's simple, Kelly. That's good.
It is munis.
But for example, each office that would need to be reimbursed for plexiglass expenditures that they've spent, yeah. Can't do that. And my number is $450,000.
So far.
So far that you spent or?
No. This is what it would take for supplies and the additional manpower to do hand cleaning and sanitizing through the end of the calendar.
Yes, maybe I should have led with this, but this committee, the ET, is a recommending body to the budget board.
Yep.
I mean, we kind of took the reins on this, just kind of get the ball rolling.
Yep. Probably
What we did with the 47 million. Do we feel this isn't the right committee to address these issues?
No, I think the emergency response committee would probably be a better committee. You know, this establishing the fund, the cost center, that's really what we needed to do here at BET. The expenditure of those funds and et cetera, and making sure everybody's safe is, I mean, it's a BOCC function. So 6 one, half dozen the other. What do you obviously had?
I didn't know if we envisioned the application process going through this committee.
I would think the application process would probably be going to the emergency response committee, because that committee has been, from day one of this issue, been dealing with it and probably has the most intimate knowledge of anybody up here about what's going on and what needs to happen and the expenditures that need to be made and those that have been made, and could have recommend approval to straight to BOCC and probably move a little bit more swiftly than a budget board and getting everybody together. I mean, usually we can get together pretty quickly with budget board. We've been able to do that pretty well. So not to knock that part, but getting 3 together is easier than getting a budget board together. So. I mean, we can certainly make an emotion to, I mean, we've set up the cost center. We've set up the accounting side of it, the best that BET can do, correct? And then from there forward, it would just be allowing the emergency response committee, which consists of our emergency management director, 3 BOCC, and then HR, Dan Matthews, which are all intimately involved in our response to everything going on. So, go ahead, sir.
I didn't mean to-
No, yeah.
And something to consider also is, I think it's appropriate for this body to make that recommendation about setting up a cost center to the budget board, and this might be a decision the budget board wanted to undertake, is deciding who they want to analyze these types of claims. So by us making that decision, we might be stepping a little outside of our bounds.
I agree. I think the budget board needs to weigh in on this. I don't think we should be the deciding factor. I mean, we could talk about it, but I do think all of the 8 elected officials need to make that decision.
Yeah, anything that comes out of here is recommendations only. I mean, we don't make
Right.
final. So,
But it needs to be discussed, the budget board, I think.
I agree. This committee is more than equipped to handle this project. We just don't know if that's our guidance.
equal in the end. So. Yeah. Just do what we need to get the budget board and get it set up, and they can discuss that there.
Yeah, I think those are the two most important steps because it allows departments like facilities to start drawing on those funds to make their future purchases. It allows for the departments that have already taken out measures, for instance, the plexiglass and whatnot, to be reimbursed and made whole for the expenses that they've already incurred. We have to have the account set up to be able to do that. So. And to Mr. Morrison's question, kind of earlier, I did find what I was looking for. There was a question, may recipients deposit fund payments into interest-bearing accounts? The answer is yes, provided that if recipients separately invest amounts received from the fund, which is what we're talking about doing, they must use the interest earned or other proceeds of these investments only to cover expenditures incurred in accordance with Section 601. So we can, but those funds will have to be used for the same purposes that the original fund was required to follow.
Cody?
Yes, Mr. Morrison. Wasn't that mine? Mine? Mr. Morrison? You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Were you trying to say something?
Well, I just, I just said thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Is there any other discussion this morning?
So are we going to try to get a special budget board to approve this fund? Is that what we were, was that a suggestion earlier in the meeting?
Yes. It was.
Yes.
We can't obviously call it, but it was part of the motion.
Right. Okay.
All
right. Because the courts are planning on opening back up like May 18th. I know we have some civil dockets coming through, and they're going to limit how many people is in a courtroom at a time. And so the hallways may be congested, and we may need to have some extra sheriff deputy to help with the crowd control. I'm just letting y'all know that we probably will need that to happen that week, that May 18th. So if the sheriff's office can or may need to have funds to be able to use this. So, and I don't think we can wait till the original budget board date, the 21st, to get it all set up. So if we can make it happen quicker, I think that would be better for all of us.
Miles, your office is chairman, and been told that it requires, special meetings require a request to the chairman's office. So can you help us on that, please?
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you. Anything else? All right. Looks like we have completed our one item. All right, board comments. Ms. Mertens?
No, thank you.
Mr. Morrison?
No, thank you.
Mr. Davidson?
No, thank you.
Mr. Lambert?
No, thank you.
Mr. Honeycutt?
None.
Ms. Lauren?
No, thank you.
Ms. Miller?
No, thank you.
None from me. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. Roll call vote. Ms. Mertens?
Aye.
Mr. Morrison?
Aye.
Mr. Davidson?
Aye.
Mr. Lambert?
Aye.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Aye.
Ms. Lauren?
Aye.
Ms. Miller?
Aye.
And Compton is an aye. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned.